For my marketing agency, there is a networking group that I attend where I was doing a featured presentation. And so the presentation is all about sales, but given the nature and the approach that I took, I thought that it would be uniquely valuable for this channel as well. So with that, I'm going to jump into it. We all sell something. We sell products, we sell services, we sell ideas, we sell the way people feel about us. We all sell something. Every conversation, every interaction with another human can be properly thought of as a sales conversation. Even if all you're trying to sell is that they enjoy your company, you're still selling something. And so whenever we partake in a conversation, any interaction with another human, we're engaging in sales. But the meta teaching there, the actual more fundamental and important teaching there, is not about sales, but that we are actually engaging in something that the ancient Greeks mastered over 2,400 years ago. This skill was so important to them that they made it the central foundational skill that was taught in their education system. We based our education system on the Greeks. And so when we first started our public education system in America, we actually followed the same principles. We've since abandoned them. We don't teach this anymore. But what we are engaging in a sales conversation or any interaction where we have any goal whatsoever is the skill that is known as rhetoric. Aristotle broke down rhetoric into 3 pillars. And a good way to think about rhetoric, a common definition that's given is something like the art and science of persuasion. I don't think that's the perfect definition. I think that it makes it sound too inherently manipulative, and that's not what proper rhetoric is. Rhetoric is skills that you lean on when you actually care about people and you want what's best for them, just as much as it's skills that you lean on when you are just trying to manipulate people. Because fundamentally, the skill of rhetoric is what is known as amoral. And amoral is very different than immoral. Immoral means that it's morally wrong. Amoral means that it's morally neutral. Just the field itself is amoral. Just like all of the sciences are amoral, rhetoric is amoral. What that means is a rhetorician who's teaching all about rhetoric would teach you the tactics and the strategies, and then it might come across as immoral because they're just talking about the things that we've learned work in the field, independent of your morality, independent of any morality that's applied to it at all. So they're not talking about whether it's right or wrong to lie. They're talking about what works and why it works in the field. This is similar to in the sciences. The scientific method doesn't tell you whether or not it's immoral to test things on rats. It doesn't tell you whether or not it's immoral to test things on humans. It doesn't tell you whether or not it's immoral to test things on animals at all. That's because the sciences are amoral. We have to bring our moral frameworks into them. And that's why I think understanding rhetoric purely as the skill of persuasion, the art and science of persuasion, is missing the point. Because if you bring a healthy morality into it, then you will use the same skills so that you can best care for others. So Aristotle broke it down into 3 pillars. The pillars were logos, pathos, and ethos. And we're going to talk about those not in the order I just listed them in. Actually, we're going to talk about pathos, logos, then ethos. Every pitch you've ever given or been given, every ad you've ever seen, every argument you've ever been in, whether that was the colloquial meaning of argument, which is more like a verbal fight, or the literal meaning of the word argument, which is a well-constructed presentation of a view. Either way, every argument you've ever been in, everything with human interaction succeeds or fails because of your use of the pathos, the logos, and the ethos. So today, I want to show you a little glimpse into these tools, a little tiny snippet of each. These are actually the fundamental tools, by the way, that built democracy. Democracy is built on the assumption that the populace will be trained in rhetoric. So here's a little bit. We're going to start with pathos. So pathos is an emotional appeal. It's using emotions in the interaction. This is why rhetoric can do something kind of entertaining based on the fact that we don't really use our language as precisely in English as maybe we ought to, because pathos is the word for that which uses emotion. Pathos is an emotional appeal. It's the ability to make people feel something. And so when you're given a presentation that's asking you for a donation, and it doesn't tug on your heartstrings the way it tried to, you can actually correctly say, sorry, but that argument wasn't pathetic enough to get my money. Because pathetic means of pathos, so of emotion, so we don't use it properly. We kind of do. You can actually see the relationship, but it's a little askew, right? It is the case that in a sales conversation, like I said, this original context was in sales for business owners, but it is the case that in a sales interaction, people buy based on emotions, but then they defend it, then they rationalize it later based on logic. And sometimes that's to other people, like maybe their spouse, but more often it's actually to themselves. So the pathos is like what in a sales interaction, the structure of how you do the sale should already have logos built in, and pathos should be what you're thinking about. And then in basically every human interaction, if you think a lot about the pathos, you're going to be doing a fantastic job at caring about the person in front of you. What this usually looks like and materializes as is being empathetic, right? So you wouldn't call being empathetic a bad thing. Utilizing pathos is not a bad thing. So here are a couple techniques of rhetoric that invoke pathos. One is an anecdote. This is where instead of simply answering a question directly, you tell a short, emotionally charged story. And that's a fantastic way to answer a question. That's a fantastic way to make a point. And you'll find that the most effective salesmen that you know do this all the time, but so do movies. So do the best interactions you have with people tend to be where you're sharing stories. Stories, I think, are somehow innately the bedrock of how humans perceive and interact with the world in a very fundamental sense. Another one, and I'm just going to give two in this section, is just being very intentional about using vivid imagery. If you can make somebody see the result that you're talking about in their mind's eye, then you've already won half the battle. And this is true in sales, but it's also true if you have a cause that you're trying to support. If you can get people to visualize what you're talking about, if you can get them to smell it, if you can get them to taste it, if you can get them to feel it, then you're going to be able to make your point better. And so let me move on to logos. Logos is where we get our word logic from. And logos is your evidence, it's your reasons, it's your data, it's your statistics, it's the why the thing works, that's the proof, it's the justification. Logos is the logic of the point that you're making. So I'm just going to give two examples of techniques that can be used in rhetoric that are invoking logos. One is a standard syllogism. Syllogism is the most basic, fundamental level of a logical argument. And so a syllogism is one where you have premise one and premise two, and then your conclusion follows by logical necessity from your premises. So I'm going to give a couple examples of this just so we have a very clear picture of what I'm talking about here. So a syllogism. I'll give the one that I used in the sales conversation because in this presentation, everyone who's watching it knows that I run an SEO agency. And so this was the one that I used to make my point with them, but I'll make a couple others for you guys. So premise one is that if you have more page views, then you get more clients. Premise two, better SEO gets you more page views. So conclusion, better SEO gets you more clients. You can see how that follows logically. The classic example that's always used in logic courses, like I've taught logic courses, is always all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. You can see the conclusion comes from the two premises. And because this form of logical argument is so easy to track, you can actually use it in a conversation. The way that I did with the SEO example. If you get more page views, then you get more clients. Better SEO gets you more page views. Therefore, better SEO, more clients. Fair enough? Fair enough. The other one that I shared that's just a beautiful example is the because principle. So there've actually been studies that have been done on this, that the study was asking to cut in line. And in one case, just asking, hey, can I cut you? Can I cut in front of you? And the other one was using the word because and then inserting a nonsensical reason. So examples of this were like, hey, can I cut in front of you because the economy's so bad right now? Right, like things that just don't make sense. And what was found, if I remember the studies right, and I didn't have these on my notes, so if I remember the study right, it's something to the effect of about 30% of people will just let you cut in front of them, which is higher than I thought. But then on the other hand, when you use the word because, about 70% of people would let you cut in front of them. So what we know is that term because, it's a rationalizing term. It's a justifying term. This is the explanation for the ask. And so when you use the word because, it actually gets people to say yes more often. So it's a very persuasive just phrase that you can throw in there. People are far more persuaded when you attach a reason. For example, in sales, you can say schedule a call because your site could be losing traffic every day you wait. So that's two examples of logos. We had the syllogism and then the because principle. Now let's talk about ethos. Ethos is where we get our word ethics from. But in the context of rhetoric, ethos is actually just talking about how the person you're interacting with perceives you. So ethos is your character, it's your reputation, it's how trustworthy you are. In sales, we talk about the know, like, trust factor, right? So know, like, and trusts. That's your ethos. And because the reality is nobody buys a product until they've bought the person selling it first. So ethos is really important. I've said in the past that when I'm teaching a class, when I was presenting this, I pointed out, if while I'm talking right now, you think of me as someone worth listening to, then I have succeeded at presenting the proper elements necessary to give the ethos that I need to do my job. I only want the ethos of teacher. So if you think that you can learn from me, I've succeeded. If you don't, then you're not paying attention. You've already zoned out. You're not this far in the video and it doesn't matter. The reality is you can have all the data in the world. You can have all the evidences in the world. You can have all the emotion and empathy and care in the world. But if you don't have the proper ethos, if the person doesn't perceive you properly, none of it matters. So let me give a couple examples of strategies that you can use to improve your ethos. I'm going to give 3, and I'm going to give them in a different order than I presented them today, because I'm going to give them actually in the order of how much I personally like them. So I think I would say personal effectiveness, but I can't say effectiveness, but I will say anecdotally from my own experience, I'm going to give them from what I think is least effective, but certainly works, to most effective / just easiest to use. So first thing you can do to build your ethos is what's known as borrowed ethos. And this is in regular casual conversation. I talked about how in business, you have borrowed ethos when someone refers someone to you. So you're talking to a referral, but in every interaction, you can use borrowed ethos by citing and quoting trusted sources, by expressing shared values, saying something that they also believe, and by pointing to authority figures who believe what you believe. And those are kind of the methodologies that you can use to borrow ethos, because these things are just painting a picture of who you are and why what you're saying is valid. And so those are ways that you can borrow ethos. Now, it requires you to know the stats or the quotes or the citations. It requires you to know the shared value so you can express it. And those things make it a little challenging at times. But quoting an industry leader or aligning with a respected cause builds trust by association. That's what it does. It makes them trust you more, which is building your ethos. The next one is one that I quite like, I use often in my life, is self-disclosure. So self-disclosure is when you simply outrightly admit a fault or limitation in yourself. And when you do this, because people don't naturally do it, it builds credibility. It makes you more trustworthy. If you're that willing to tell me things that are unflattering about yourself, then I intrinsically believe that that what you say is true, that you're being honest with me, and that builds ethos. I now trust you more. So for instance, I might say, in my business, we're not the cheapest, but we are fantastic at what we do. Something like that, right? Actually, the example I used in the networking group was, I'm not the best at communication. I drop the ball on communication a lot. Sometimes it takes me a week to respond to my email, but I am absolutely the best at the service that I provide for my clients, and they all love it because of that. And that builds ethos. I tell them be honest. Where are my shortcomings? I can just be honest about that. And then I tell them, and this is what we're good at. And I now trust that that's what we're good at. And in that example, that actually pans out well, because then when I don't respond to my emails in a week, they kind of expected that. And when they get fantastic results, then they're like, yeah, this is exactly what he said. And that builds credibility as well. And now the last one I'm going to share is actually my personal favorite, not even only of the strategies that I'm talking about today, but it's my favorite strategy for ethos. I use it all the time, and it's still a simple strategy of concession. Concession is when you acknowledge or grant a point to the opponent or audience, and technically you are supposed to then pivot and use it for your point. This would be, you're absolutely right. We are quite expensive. But our clients don't hire us because we're the cheapest. They hire us because we are the best at what we do, and they want real results. Now, this is a very framed, canned example, but really the concession doesn't always have to be used to make your own point, and I often don't use it to make my point. So in my dialogues and interactions with people, I'm actively looking for reasons to agree with them and to point out that I agree with them rather than just keeping it in my head. That's a good point. No, I think you're right on that. No, I think we agree there. No, that's actually a really good point. I haven't thought about that. I'm going to chew on that one because I think you might be right there, and I'm going to look into that. Actually, I think we agree about pretty much everything we're talking about right now. Those types of concessions, as often as frequently as I can, I make them because they build your ethos. They make people feel heard and validated. And I don't just say it, to be clear. I bring my morality into this. I don't just say it. I say it when it's true. And I look for opportunities to make honest concessions. So the balance of what we talked about here is pathos, which generally speaking, that's emotional appeals. They get attention. Logos, generally speaking, those are logical appeals and they earn agreement. Ethos, those are character appeals and they build trust. So those are the three categories, and we gave a couple examples of each. So here's what's fascinating. Rhetoric, what we've been talking about today, isn't just the art of the deal. It's actually the foundational skills that democracy is built on. When people stop using logos, pathos, and ethos well, they stop understanding each other. This is why it's foundational for a Greek education system. It's why it was the starting point of ours when we founded the democracy of our country. And this realization changed so much for me. This is why Free Speech Ministries exists, because we are losing the capacity to have honest and healthy disagreements in politics because we don't learn the skills. And when we don't have that capacity, well, we're watching in real time that our democracy is crumbling. And the goal of Free Speech Ministries is to do everything we can to sustain the democracy, to sustain the country that we're in, and to honestly, to also share the gospel with every single American, with every single person who lives in this country. And so those are what we're doing. And this is the bedrock. The bedrock is that we understand how to have these helpful conversations. That's what I got for you guys today. If you appreciated this, do me a favor and subscribe so that you can get the next videos that we push out. See you then.